It took me more than 27 years to understand what Bruce Lee could explain in just 10 minutes. Not about martial arts, not about fighting, not about being strong, but about something far more uncomfortable. Most people are not honest with themselves. Bruce Lee once said that martial art at its core is simply this: honestly expressing who you are. And that sounds simple until you realize how rare it actually is. Because lying to others is easy, but lying to yourself is effortless. It becomes a habit. You can act confident, you can perform strength, you can wear the image the world rewards. But if that image isn't rooted in truth, then everything you show is just performance, style, noise. And Bruce Lee despised that illusion. What he was really trying to teach had nothing to do with punches or kicks. It was about identity, and most people weren't ready to hear it. Bruce Lee believed that martial art carried a meaning far deeper than most people ever realized. To him, martial art was not about learning how to fight someone else. It was about learning how to express yourself honestly. And that, he said, was incredibly difficult. Because being honest does not mean showing technique. It does not mean looking impressive, and it certainly does not mean putting on a performance. Bruce explained it as a balance between two forces. On one side, there is natural instinct. On the other, there is control. If you rely only on instinct, you become reckless, emotional, unscientific. But if you rely only on control, you turn mechanical. You stop being human. The mistake Bruce warned was taking either side to the extreme. True mastery lives in harmony. That harmony is where instinct flows freely, but discipline keeps it grounded. Where movement feels natural yet intentional, where you are not pretending and not rigid. This idea extended far beyond martial arts. Bruce was talking about life itself. Most people swing between extremes. They either suppress who they are to fit expectations, or they unleash emotion without direction and call it being real. Bruce rejected both. He believed the ideal state was neither pure naturalness nor forced discipline, but something in between, a controlled freedom, a naturalness that had been earned. And once you understood that balance, you began to understand what Bruce Lee was really teaching. Not how to fight, but how to live without betraying yourself. There was one word Bruce Lee openly disliked: superstar. He said it turned him off immediately. Not because of humility, but because to him the word itself was dishonest. A star, Bruce explained, is an illusion. It's a label created by the public. Something projected onto you, not something you truly are. And the danger is subtle. Once you start believing the label, you stop being a person. You begin protecting an image, maintaining a role, living for expectations that were never yours to begin with. Bruce rejected that completely. He didn't want to see himself as a symbol, a title, or a product. He wanted to see himself as a human being. Under the sky, under heaven, he said, there is only one family. People are different, yes. Different cultures, different faces, different ways of expression. But the core is the same. This belief shaped everything he did. It explained why he refused to fit neatly into any category. Why he resisted being boxed in as just a martial artist, just a Chinese actor, just an exotic figure for Western audiences. Bruce Lee wasn't trying to become larger than life. He was trying to remain human in a world that constantly rewards illusion. Bruce Lee was born in 1940, but what mattered more than the date was what followed. From a young age, movement was never just movement to him. He didn't train to collect techniques. He trained to understand why they existed. Wing Chun taught him economy. Fencing taught him timing and distance. Other disciplines taught him structure, rhythm, restraint, but none of them felt complete. By the time he was barely out of his teens, Bruce had already begun questioning everything he was taught, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. He saw that styles hardened over time. They stopped evolving. They became traditions people defended instead of tools people questioned. So he did something radical. He stopped trying to perfect a style and started stripping them down. What remained became Jeet Kune Do. Not a system meant to be memorized, but a framework meant to be adapted. Efficiency over appearance, truth over tradition, expression over imitation. Every movement had to justify itself. Every action had to serve a purpose. Bruce wasn't searching for dominance. He was searching for alignment between body and mind, instinct and awareness. Jeet Kune Do wasn't just how he fought, it was how he thought, how he lived. And it would soon lead him to the idea that defined his legacy more than any punch ever could. Then Bruce Lee said something so simple that most people thought it was poetic nonsense. Empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. At first, it sounds like philosophy meant to impress, something you nod at, quote once, and move on from. But Bruce wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was being precise. He asked you to imagine water for a reason. You pour water into a cup, and it becomes the cup. You pour it into a bottle, and it becomes the bottle. You pour it into a teapot, and it becomes the teapot. Water does not resist shape. It does not argue with reality. It adapts instantly without losing what it is. And that, Bruce believed, was the highest form of intelligence. Water can flow, and water can crash. It can be gentle enough to slip through your fingers, yet powerful enough to carve canyons into solid rock. Bruce pointed out something most people never consider. Water is the softest substance in the world, yet nothing is harder to stop. You can't grab it. You can't punch it and hurt it. You can't trap it for long. And that's why it survives. Bruce wasn't talking about fighting opponents. He was talking about surviving pressure. Most people respond to life by hardening. They stiffen when challenged. They cling to identity, routine, opinion. They believe strength means rigidity. Bruce saw the opposite. Rigidity breaks. Flexibility endures. In combat, a rigid fighter reacts slowly. They commit too early. They resist change. But a fluid fighter adapts in real time. They respond instead of forcing. They remain present. Bruce believed life worked the same way. When expectations hit you, be water. When failure reshapes your path, be water. When identity collapses, be water. Not passive, not weak, responsive. He warned against living inside fixed forms, fixed styles, fixed roles, fixed ideas of who you are supposed to be. Because the moment you crystallize, you stop growing. Water never crystallizes by choice, only when frozen. And Bruce saw freezing everywhere. People froze into careers they hated, beliefs they never questioned, personalities built to please others. They mistook consistency for truth. Bruce refused to live that way. Be water was his rejection of rigidity, of ego, of the need to appear solid. Because when you insist on being solid, life eventually hits harder than you can withstand. But when you stay fluid, nothing truly destroys you. It only changes your shape. Bruce didn't want you to imitate water. He wanted you to understand it, to see that strength isn't about resisting reality, but moving with it intelligently. That adaptability is not indecision. It's awareness. That losing shape doesn't mean losing self. It means discovering it. And this is where people misunderstand him. Be water was not about avoiding conflict. It was about choosing how to meet it. Flow when you can. Crash when you must. But never become rigid just to feel strong. Because rigidity is fear disguised as discipline. Bruce Lee's message wasn't meant to comfort you. It was meant to challenge the way you define strength. And once you truly understand what water is, you start to see why everything else he said leads back to this one idea. Because the hardest thing for a human being to do is not to fight. It's to let go of the performance and remain fluid enough to be real. Bruce Lee said something that made many people uncomfortable even when they laughed it off. Performing is easy. Being honest is not. He admitted how simple it was to look impressive, to act confident, to display fancy movement, to flood yourself with a cocky feeling and mistake that sensation for truth. Anyone can do that. You can build an image. You can rehearse a personality. You can master gestures that make people nod in approval. But Bruce warned that none of this meant you were real. He said, the most dangerous lie is not the one you tell others. It's the one you tell yourself. Because once you start believing your own performance, you stop questioning it. And the moment you stop questioning, growth ends. This is why Bruce spoke about unacting, acting, and acting, unacting, not as wordplay, but as a warning. If everything you do is acting, you lose touch with instinct. But if everything you do is instinct, you lose awareness. One extreme turns you into a performer. The other turns you into chaos. Bruce saw both as traps. A person who relies only on instinct becomes reckless, emotional, unscientific. But a person who relies only on control becomes mechanical, predictable, disconnected. He said that kind of person is no longer fully human. And this wasn't theory for him. Bruce openly admitted that he could easily impress people. He could create illusions. He could show techniques that looked powerful but meant nothing. What he struggled with and what he respected most was expressing himself honestly without lying to himself, even for a moment. That kind of honesty leaves you exposed. You can't hide behind style. You can't hide behind reputation. You can't hide behind what people expect you to be. And most people avoid that vulnerability at all costs. They would rather look strong than be truthful, rather look disciplined than feel uncertain, rather repeat what works than risk discovering what's real. Bruce rejected that comfort. He believed that when control dominates instinct, a person becomes stiff. When instinct dominates control, a person becomes scattered. The balance is fragile, and maintaining it requires constant awareness. Not once, every day. That's why Bruce didn't talk about mastery as a destination. He talked about it as a process of shedding what is fake, of noticing when you're performing instead of expressing, of catching yourself when ego replaces awareness. Because the hardest battle is not against an opponent, it's against the urge to protect an image. And Bruce Lee believed that the moment you stop performing for approval, the moment you stop lying to yourself about who you are, you begin to move, not just physically, but mentally, with real freedom. Not perfect, not polished, but honest. And that honesty, he believed, was the true foundation of strength. Despite being associated with combat, Bruce Lee was deeply opposed to violence for its own sake. He said he hoped that any violence shown in his films would explain why it happened, not glorify it, not sell it as spectacle. Because for Bruce, the real conflict was never external. When asked what he thought while facing an opponent, his answer was simple: there is no opponent. And when pressed further, he explained why: because the word I does not exist. Bruce believed that the moment ego enters, clarity disappears. You stop responding to reality and start defending identity. Winning becomes personal. Losing becomes threatening. That's why he spoke about accepting defeat, not as weakness, but as liberation. To accept loss, he said, is to learn how to die, to let go of attachment to outcome, image, and fear. Only then are you free to act fully. Bruce wasn't teaching people how to dominate others. He was teaching them how to remove the internal barriers that made them rigid, reactive, and afraid. When ego dissolves, there is no one left to prove anything to, no role to protect, no image to maintain. And in that state, action becomes clear, not violent, not passive, just precise. In 1971, Bruce Lee's ideas reached the world through film, not just through movement, but through meaning. His goal was never fame alone, it was connection, to bridge cultures, to dissolve boundaries between East and West. Yet even in Hollywood he struggled. He once admitted that when he first arrived in America he felt like a robot, surrounded by people yet unable to be himself, trying to accumulate external security instead of asking a simple question: what would Bruce Lee do? That question became his compass. He wrote constantly, tracked his training, recorded his thoughts, affirmations, doubts, because he believed that all knowledge in the end leads to one place: self-knowledge. In 1973, at just 32 years old, Bruce Lee passed away, but his message did not. He left behind more than films or techniques. He left a challenge: to let go of illusion, to stop performing, to remain fluid enough to be real. And for those willing to listen, his voice is still clear.